As we've been discussing, a review into the government's Prevent programme has found taxpayers' money has been handed to groups promoting Islamist extremism. The review, led by William Shawcross, found that individuals who have allegedly supported the Taliban, defended militant Islamist groups banned in the UK and hosted hate preachers are amongst those who've received taxpayers' money. Apparently, as well, some of them decided that we should have Muslim people in our army who refuse to follow orders. Anyway, to give his thoughts on this is the former National Counter-Terrorism Coordinator, Nick Aldworth. Nick, thank you very, very much. The public have a right to know, surely, exactly where this money was sent to, how much money was sent there, and why on earth it was sent there.
I completely agree. I mean, public taxpayers have a right to know how all of their money is spent and whatever, thematic that the government is using it for. I think it's worth mentioning that, this is a review that was commissioned by the government itself. And so I would hate for anybody to think that there's not transparency around this. Prevent, from the day that it was incepted, has had a number of reputational challenges around it. But I would say that on the greater balance, it is an incredibly good programme and is a vital part of our overall counter-terrorism strategy. My concern,
just quickly, my concern on what you've just said there is that the only reason we know any of this is because it's been leaked. The government allegedly are trying to cover this up because they are, quote, terrified of looking like they're picking on Muslims, and the report itself, apparently, has been deliberately skewed to focus more on far-right terrorism than Islamist extremism, despite the fact there have been 35 times more people killed as a result of Islamist extremism in the UK since 2005 than from far-right terrorism.
So I think, in fairness, I haven't seen the report, so I don't know whether it's skewed or not, but I think what you've just alluded to is the suggestion inside the leaked report that the Prevent programme has been skewed more towards right-wing rather than the report has been skewed towards the right-wing. Now, I can't authoritatively comment on that, but what we do know is that the number of referrals from the extreme right-wing into the Prevent programme has parity with those from Islamist extremist concerns. Now, you're absolutely right. By a country mile, the Islamist extremist threat is the greatest terrorist threat that this country faces. That's been advocated and articulated, rather, several times by the head of MI5 and the head of counter-terrorism policing. So nobody's hiding away from that fact. And I'm not here to defend the government or speak on their behalf. But in fairness, if they wanted to hide a report, there's been plenty of other opportunities in recent months to release it at a time when it would probably get lost in the foray of...
I get that. There's a lot to unpack here. One of the reasons why supposedly they want to redact the names of some of these groups who have allegedly done things like, and I'm quoting here now, actively supported the Taliban, urged Muslim members of the armed forces to refuse orders, been very favourable towards hateful rhetoric from radical Islamist preachers, is because they wouldn't want to offend those groups or face potential legal action. I know very prominent cases where we didn't want to offend certain groups of Muslims, i.e. the grooming gang scandals that were taking place right across this country. Why are we so afraid of offending them?
So we should be exercising policing, and that's what I speak on, without fear or favour. And I'm confident that happens. I think individuals sometimes feel self-conscious about approaching or being in the middle of issues that are clearly, have the potential to be inflammatory or create tensions. And I was listening, obviously, to your previous interview. And those are very much the same sort of subjects that people still get a bit nervous around. But what we have to focus on, Patrick, is the systems, and make sure that the systems are fair and exercised without fear. Individuals will always, make mistakes, but the system needs to be prescribed and structured so that it focuses on what it's meant to do, which is to prevent people from becoming radicalised and becoming terrorists, whatever that ideology is.
Absolutely, and I appreciate you coming on and giving very, very strong words on all of this. And my concern, apart from all of it, really, to be fair, but one of my concerns would be whether or not this money has been deliberately sent to groups that promote things like radical Islam. That is a question being raised by an individual apparently very close to the author of this report. Do you think there is any chance that people who are working in the distribution of funds for the Prevent scheme will have deliberately given money to groups knowing that they, well, for example, support the Taliban?
So I would hope not. But of course, our government allegiances change quite often. And barely more than a couple of years ago, most Western governments withdrew from Afghanistan in the belief that the Taliban had mended their ways and were going to become a legitimate government. So I think some of this needs to be looked at in the context of when this is supposed to have happened, but also to reflect on the fact that, unfortunately, sometimes to resolve terrorism, you have to engage in a dialogue. And of course, that's what we did with the Irish Republican Army and successfully brought, to a greater extent, peace in Northern Ireland. But again, I'm hypothesising and greatly speculating on why money might have been given to people, or indeed, for that matter, if it has been. As I say, I've not seen the report. I look forward to seeing it. We've been waiting for it for a long time. And I think, that would be the one criticism I would have of government on this matter, is that, this is a really important review around a really important subject. We need to get rid of any errors in the programme and get it working properly, and so that everybody has confidence in it.
Can I just pick your brains as your capacity as the former National Counter-Terrorism Coordinator? Massive gig, that. Massive job. You're a chap in the know. Were there ever discussions about the fact that it might be easier to sweep some elements of radical Islamism in the UK under the rug for fear of stoking racial tensions? Was that ever discussed?
Never. Never in policing, and I can't speak for any other body or agency. I find it extremely unlikely. And when you look at how some of the terrorist investigations were managed, certainly over my time, 2017, 2018, we were arresting great swathes of people to get to the bottom of individuals who had committed offences or were planning on committing offences. And indeed, all of those matters were then looked at the independent reviewer for terrorism. In my days, Sir David as is now Lord Anderson, and those actions were found to be legitimate. My view of terrorism policing is that is definitely executed without fear or favour.
Good stuff. Look, thank you very much. Real pleasure to have you on the show, and I hope you had a wonderful Christmas with you and yours. Former National Counter-Terrorism Coordinator Nick Aldworth there, just reacting to this news. Shocking news as it is, and we do all await this report with bated breath, and I will be picking over it word by word, which appears to indicate anyway that millions of pounds in taxpayers' money from the Prevent scheme was actually sent to groups who supported the Taliban, promoted radical Islamist extremism in the UK, and even wanted Muslim members of our armed forces to refuse orders. How on earth was that allowed to happen? If indeed it did happen, although it seems pretty cast iron anyway that it did. We'll have to wait and see. But yes, I mean, the big one for me there is the massive question that's coming out in this report now, which is whether or not Prevent knowingly did that. And if they did do that, why?